I have always been private about my finances, even after my tech startup unexpectedly sold 5 years ago and changed everything. Despite being worth $12 million, I still live in a modest apartment and drive a reliable but unassuming car. I never imagined my carefully guarded secret would explode during Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' home in Chicago. One simple phone notification was all it took to transform my family from distant relatives to determined financial advisors overnight. Before I tell you how my own family tried to tear me apart over money I earned, drop a comment letting me know if you have ever had relatives feel entitled to your success. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood on the northwest side of Chicago, where my parents, Richard and Linda, raised my sister Jessica and me in a small but comfortable 3-bedroom home. From an early age, the family dynamic was clear as day. Jessica was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. She was 3 years older than me, beautiful, popular, and seemed to excel effortlessly at everything she touched. While Jessica was being crowned homecoming queen and earning a prestigious university scholarship, I was the awkward kid who found refuge in the world of computers. At 12, I taught myself programming on a second-hand desktop that was practically ancient technology even then. My parents never really understood my passion, viewing it as an antisocial hobby rather than a potential career path. My dad would shake his head whenever he found me coding late into the night. "Devin, why cannot you be more like your sister? She is out there making connections, building her future. You are just wasting time on that machine." High school was rough. I was not athletic or particularly charismatic, and the academic structure never clicked with my learning style. When I dropped out of community college after 3 semesters, the disappointment from my parents was palpable. Jessica had graduated with honors from Northwestern by then, and was pursuing her teaching credential, following the respectable path they had always envisioned for their children. "Well, at least one of our kids is making something of themselves," my dad remarked, during a particularly tense Sunday dinner after I announced I was leaving college. My mom tried to soften the blow, but her eyes revealed the same sentiment. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Chicago and took entry-level tech support jobs that barely covered my rent. During evenings, weekends, and any free moment in between, I worked on my own projects. An idea had been forming in my mind for a new approach to cybersecurity software, something that could protect small businesses from increasingly sophisticated attacks without requiring enterprise-level resources. For 3 solid years, I worked 80-hour weeks, surviving on ramen noodles and discount grocery store coffee. My social life was practically non-existent. When I did see my family at obligatory holiday gatherings, they would ask perfunctory questions about my work, before quickly shifting attention to Jessica's latest accomplishments or her relationship with Mark, a pharmaceutical sales representative she met at a charity fundraiser. They got married in an elaborate ceremony that my parents spent a year planning and saving for. I contributed what I could at the time, which was embarrassingly little, and Jessica made sure everyone knew she was grateful for even the small gifts. The subtle dig went unnoticed by everyone, except me. Then came the breakthrough I had been working toward. A major tech company expressed interest in my security software. What started as a casual conversation at a networking event, I had forced myself to attend escalated into multiple meetings with their acquisition team. After 6 months of negotiations that I navigated with the help of a lawyer friend who believed in my product, they offered $12 million for my technology and a 2-year consulting contract to help integrate it into their systems. The day I signed those papers was surreal. I remember sitting in my cramped apartment afterward, staring at the confirmation email, unable to process that my bank account would soon contain more money than I had ever imagined possessing. My first impulse was to call my parents to finally show them that their disappointment in me had been misplaced. But something held me back. Years of dismissive comments and diminished expectations had created a protective caution in me. I decided to keep my newfound wealth private, at least until I figured out what to do with it. I paid off my student loans, moved to a slightly better apartment in the same neighborhood, and traded my constantly breaking down car for a reliable but modest Honda. Nothing flashy, Nothing that would raise eyebrows. I invested the majority of the money with the help of a financial advisor who specialized in sudden wealth transitions. Through careful portfolio management, my initial 12 million grew steadily. Meanwhile, my family continued to see me as the underachieving son who worked with computers and probably made a decent but unimpressive living. Jessica and Mark bought a house in an upscale Chicago suburb that stretched their finances thin. They had 2 kids in quick succession, and Jessica cut back to part-time teaching to care for them. From comments dropped at family gatherings, it became clear they were struggling financially despite their outward appearance of success. My parents frequently helped them with temporary loans that everyone knew would never be repaid. Every year, my family maintained the tradition of gathering at my parents' suburban home for Thanksgiving. These events were always a mixture of nostalgia and discomfort for me. I loved my family despite our differences, but the constant comparisons and subtle digs at my perceived lack of achievement were exhausting. Little did I know that the Thanksgiving gathering 5 years after my windfall would change everything. I had no idea that my carefully maintained privacy was about to be shattered, along with any illusion that my family valued me for more than my potential usefulness to them. I arrived at my parents' house just after noon on Thanksgiving Day, carrying a reasonably priced bottle of wine that would neither draw attention for being too expensive nor too cheap. The familiar smell of roasting turkey and my mother's signature sage stuffing filled the air as I rang the doorbell, steeling myself for the annual performance of being the family underachiever. My mother answered already, wearing the festive turkey apron my sister had given her years ago. "Devin, you are finally here. Everyone else arrived an hour ago." Her tone carried the usual implication that I was somehow letting everyone down despite being exactly on time. The living room was filled with the usual suspects. My father and Uncle Dave were watching football and arguing about the referee's call. Aunt Susan and my grandmother were arranging appetizers on the dining room table. Jessica and Mark were sitting on the couch, their children playing on tablets at their feet. "Look who decided to show up," Jessica announced as I entered. "How is the computer business, Devin? Still fixing other people's email problems?" I forced a smile, having long ago learned that explaining the complexity of cybersecurity consulting was pointless. Business is good, thanks. "How are the kids doing in school?" This successfully diverted Jessica into a 20-minute monologue about her daughter Emma's gifted program and her son Tyler's promising athletic abilities. Throughout her detailed account, she managed to slip in several comments about the cost of private coaching and educational enrichment programs. "It is so hard on a teacher's salary," and with Mark's territory being reduced, she sighed dramatically. "But we will sacrifice anything for our children's futures." Dinner itself was the usual performance of family dynamics that had been established decades ago. My mother served everyone else before herself. My father complained about the turkey being dry despite it being perfectly cooked, and Jessica dominated the conversation with stories about her role as PTA president and the challenges of balancing work and motherhood. "We just had to replace our furnace last month," Jessica mentioned while passing the mashed potatoes. $10,000. We definitely did not have in the budget. "But what can you do when winter is coming and you have children to keep warm?" My father nodded sympathetically. "Family supports family. That is what we have always done." The conversation shifted to my cousin's recent engagement and the astronomical cost of weddings these days. I was relieved to no longer be adjacent to the financial discussion and allowed myself to relax slightly, even pulling out my phone to quickly check an email notification that had buzzed during dinner. That single action changed everything. "Could you pass the salt?" Devin, Jessica asked, leaning toward me. As I reached for the salt shaker with one hand, my phone screen was clearly visible in my other hand. And there it was. A notification from my investment app showing the current total balance, $12,342,819.37. Jessica froze salt shaker halfway to her plate. Her eyes widened as they fixed on my phone screen. "What the hell, Devin?" Her voice cut through the dinner conversation, immediately silencing everyone at the table. "You have $12 million. The room went completely quiet. I quickly turned off my phone screen, but the damage was done. "What did you say?" My mother put down her fork, looking between Jessica and me with confusion. Devin has $12 million in his account. I just saw it on his phone. Jessica's voice was rising with each word. $12 million. And he has been sitting here listening to us talk about furnace payments and school fees without saying a word. All eyes turned to me. I could feel heat rising in my face as I scrambled to respond. It is complicated. It is not like that. Not like what my father's expression had transformed from confusion to something like calculated interest. Do you or do you not have that kind of money, son? I took a deep breath. There was no point denying it now. I sold my security software 5 years ago. The company paid well for it. 5 years. My mother's voice was barely above a whisper, hurt, evident in her tone. You have had this money for 5 years, and never told us, your own family. Before I could respond, Jessica pushed her chair back from the table. I cannot believe this. We have been struggling for years. Mark and I can barely afford our mortgage, the kids' activities, our car payments. We had to borrow money from Mom and Dad for basic home repairs. And all this time you have been sitting on millions like some kind of miser. That is not fair, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My financial situation is my private business. Private business. Jessica laughed bitterly. We are family. There is no such thing as private when your sister cannot afford to fix her car, or your niece and nephew need braces. The dinner had completely derailed now. My mother began crying quietly while my father put his arm around her shoulders, all while giving me a look that mixed disappointment with something else. Opportunity, perhaps. I think what your sister means, he said carefully, is that family helps family. That is what we have always taught you both. You mean like how you helped me? When I was working 18-hour days on my software, the words slipped out before I could stop them. Or how about when you told me I was wasting my time on computers instead of getting a real job like Jessica, grandmother Ellen? Usually the peacemaker surprisingly spoke up. The boy earned his money through his own work. It is not anyone else's business what he does with it. Mom. My father shot her a warning look. Do not mom me, Richard. I raised you better than to count other people's money. Uncle Dave, who had been quiet until now, and was clearly several drinks into the holiday, chuckled. Hell, I would have kept it quiet too if I had that kind of cash. Everyone comes crawling out of the woodwork when they smell money. Jessica's face flushed red. This is not about smelling money, Uncle Dave. This is about Devin watching us struggle while he sits on a fortune. The tension was becoming unbearable. I stood up, needing some air, and retreated to the kitchen. My mother followed me a few minutes later. How could you keep this from me, Devin? Your own mother. Her voice was low, hurt. Do you know how many nights I have lain awake, worrying about how to help Jessica and the kids? We remortgaged the house last year to help them with their down payment. I did not know that I said honestly, because you have not been part of this family, not really. And now I find out my own son is a millionaire. What am I supposed to think? My father appeared in the doorway, his expression now fully transformed into business mode. Look, son, what is done is done. But now we need to talk about moving forward. Jessica and Mark could really use some help. Nothing extravagant, just enough to get them back on their feet. Maybe $1 million or so. I nearly choked. $1 million. Just like that, you have 12 million. You would not even miss it, he pressed. And they really need it. They are family. Your family. I looked between my parents, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity what I had always sensed but never fully acknowledged. I was valuable to them now only because of what I could provide. I need some time to think, I managed to say, moving toward the front door. This is a lot to process. There is nothing to process. Jessica had appeared behind my father, her eyes red, but her voice hard. You either care about your family, or you do not. I left the house amid accusations of selfishness and betrayal, the Thanksgiving meal abandoned on the dining room table. As I drove away, my phone began lighting up with messages from family members who had already been informed about my newly discovered wealth. The days following Thanksgiving were a bombardment of communication I was not prepared for. Jessica sent multiple texts daily, each one more demanding than the last. Emma needs braces and special therapy for her learning challenges. That is 30,000 right there. Our roof is leaking and needs to be replaced before winter really hits. Another 20,000 we do not have. Tyler got into the elite travel soccer team. It is 15,000 for the season, but will really help his college prospects. You could give him a real future. My parents positioned themselves as mediators, which in practice meant applying additional pressure from a different angle. Your sister is family, Devin. How can you turn your back on family? We always thought you would be the one needing help, not the other way around. Cannot you find it in your heart to support Jessica like we always supported you? That last message made me laugh bitterly. When had they ever supported my dreams or aspirations? I could not recall a single instance of them encouraging my interest in programming or technology. Even extended family members I barely spoke to throughout the year suddenly found reasons to reach out. Cousin Stephanie needed help with college tuition. Uncle Dave had a sure-thing business opportunity. A second cousin I had met perhaps twice in my life was starting a wellness coaching practice and needed startup capital. I tried setting boundaries, explaining that I was not comfortable discussing my finances and that I needed space. This was met with accusations of being selfish, stuck up, and forgetting where I came from. The situation escalated when Jessica showed up unannounced at my apartment one evening, a week after Thanksgiving. She had a binder tucked under her arm and a determined expression on her face. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room before I could object. "I have put together some numbers that will help you understand our situation." For the next hour, she walked me through meticulously prepared spreadsheets, detailing her and Mark's debts, monthly expenses, the children's educational needs, and their mortgage situation. The presentation culminated in a proposed family assistance plan that would require an immediate transfer of $1,200,000, followed by monthly support payments of $10,000 for at least the next 5 years. "This is a reasonable request, considering what you have," she concluded, looking at me expectantly. "You owe this to us. I owe it to you," I repeated, genuinely confused. "How did you arrive at that conclusion?" "We are family. Mom and Dad raised you, put a roof over your head, fed you, and now you have the opportunity to pay that back by helping us. That is how family works, Devin." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, I sympathize with your financial struggles, but these are the result of choices you and Mark made. The house in Winnetka, you could not afford the luxury cars, the private lessons, and expensive vacations. I did not make those choices for you." Her eyes narrowed. "So you are just going to hoard your money while your niece and nephew suffer, while your own parents have to remortgage their retirement home to help us. That is who you really are. I am not responsible for bailing out adults who made poor financial decisions," I said as gently as I could, "even if those adults are family." Jessica's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, but they seemed more from frustration than genuine hurt. "You have no idea what it is like to struggle. To have to tell your children they cannot have things their friends have. Mark and I have not had a vacation in 2 years because every spare dollar goes to the kids or the house." As she continued detailing their hardships, I realized something did not add up. "Jessica, you and Mark have a combined income of well over $100,000. Where is all that money going?" She hesitated just long enough for me to know there was something she was not telling me. "The economy, inflation, kids' activities. It all adds up." 2 days later, my parents called for a family meeting at their house to discuss the situation reasonably. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend, hoping to put this matter to rest once and for all. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just my parents and Jessica's family, but also Uncle Dave, Aunt Susan, and my grandmother. This was not a discussion. It was an ambush. One by one, they took turns explaining why I should share my wealth with Jessica. My mother cried about family loyalty. My father talked about responsibility to those less fortunate. Uncle Dave reminded me that you cannot take it with you. Throughout it all, Jessica sat smugly, occasionally nodding in agreement. Finally, her husband Mark, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "Look, Devin, there is something you should know." He glanced nervously at Jessica before continuing. "Part of our financial problems. Well, Jessica has had some issues with online gambling over the past few years. We owe almost $90,000 to credit card companies, and there is another personal loan from Jessica's friend that is coming due." The room went silent. Jessica's face turned crimson. "You promised not to tell anyone about that," she hissed at Mark. "He deserves to know the truth if we are asking for his money." Mark replied, looking exhausted. Suddenly, many things made sense. The increasing financial troubles despite their solid income, the desperation behind Jessica's demands, the real reason my parents had remortgaged their house. "So this is not about braces and soccer teams," I said quietly. "This is about covering gambling debts. It is an addiction." Devin, my mother, quickly interjected. "Your sister is sick and needs help." "Has she gotten professional help for this addiction?" I asked. The uncomfortable silence answered my question. "So instead of addressing the actual problem, you want me to throw money at it? Money that will likely go toward more gambling. How dare you?" Jessica stood up. "I am getting better, and the kids really do need those things I mentioned. This is not just about my problem. Jessica told us she has stopped gambling completely," my father added. "She promised." But the way Mark looked down at his hands told me everything I needed to know. "I am willing to pay for addiction counseling," I offered, "but I will not give money that will enable destructive behavior or be gambled away." Jessica's expression hardened. "Fine. If that is how you want to be, you should know your decision has consequences. The kids were asking about Uncle Devin just yesterday, wondering when they would see you again. It would be a shame if they grew up without knowing their uncle." The threat was unmistakable. My access to my niece and nephew was being used as leverage. I stood up suddenly clear about what I needed to do. "I earned every dollar I have through work that none of you supported or believed in. For years I lived on ramen noodles and worked 18-hour days while you," I looked at Jessica, "were being praised for following the traditional path. Now that my risk and hard work have paid off, you want to reap benefits you did nothing to earn." "But family," my mother began. "Real family would be proud of my success, not immediately calculating how to profit from it," I interrupted. "Real family would have supported my dreams from the beginning, not just when they turned out to be lucrative." My mother's face crumpled. "Are you choosing money over your family, Devin? Is that really the kind of person you have become?" The question hung in the air as I looked around the room at the faces of people I had known my entire life, now transformed by greed and entitlement. "No," I said finally. "I am choosing self-respect over exploitation. There is a difference." I walked out of my parents' house that day, unsure if I still had a family. The silence that followed me to my car was deafening, broken only by Jessica's angry sobs and my father's heavy sigh of disappointment. The holiday season that followed was the loneliest of my life. For the first time, there were no awkward family gatherings, no obligatory gift exchanges, no forced conversations around dining tables. The silence from my family was absolute, except for occasional texts from my mother that alternated between guilt trips and tentative olive branches, always with strings attached. I found myself questioning everything. Had I been too harsh, too selfish? The doubts crept in during quiet evenings alone in my apartment, the Christmas lights of neighboring buildings twinkling through my window while I sat in darkness. Seeking clarity, I began working with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and financial boundaries. Dr. Morrison helped me see that my family's reaction revealed patterns that had existed long before the money came into the picture. "Your success triggered insecurities and jealousies that were already there," she explained during one session. "The money just made them impossible to ignore anymore." Over time, I came to a difficult realization. True family supports each other's dreams and celebrates achievements, not just exploits them. My parents and Jessica had never really seen me, only the role they had assigned me in their family narrative. The disappointing son, the underachiever, the one who would never measure up to his sister's conventional success. Rather than dwelling in hurt and isolation, I decided to channel my energy into connections and causes that felt meaningful. I established an anonymous scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in technology and computer science. I began mentoring young programmers at a community center in my old neighborhood. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who valued ideas, innovation, and genuine human connection. 6 months after the Thanksgiving disaster, I received an unexpected email from Mark. He and Jessica had separated, and he wanted to apologize for his part in the family conflict. He explained that Jessica's gambling had only worsened, and my parents were now facing possible foreclosure after taking out additional loans to cover her debts. Despite everything, I still cared about my family's well-being. I arranged for a financial counselor to work with my parents, paid off their mortgage anonymously through a lawyer, and established a trust for my niece and nephew's education that could only be accessed when they turned 18. I made sure none of these actions could be manipulated or diverted to feed Jessica's addiction. My parents reached out after discovering I was behind the mortgage payoff. The conversation was strained but opened a door to possible reconciliation. However, it quickly became clear that their view of me as the family bank had not fundamentally changed. When I refused additional requests for money to help Jessica get back on her feet, communication dwindled once again. Through my volunteer work at a tech education nonprofit, I met Rachel, a brilliant software engineer who shared my passion for expanding technology access to underserved communities. Our connection was based on shared values and genuine interest in each other's work and ideas. When she eventually learned about my financial situation months into our relationship, her response was refreshingly straightforward. "That is awesome, that your hard work paid off," she said. "Now can you help me debug this module? I have been stuck on it all day." In her and in the friends I made through my volunteer work, I found the acceptance and appreciation that had always been missing in my family relationships. I discovered that family can be chosen built on mutual respect rather than obligation or shared DNA. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving revelation, I found myself in a completely different place emotionally. The hurt had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more like acceptance. I had created boundaries that protected my well-being while still leaving room for genuine reconciliation. Should my family ever truly see me for who I am, not what I could provide them. The most profound lesson I learned from this painful experience was that money does not create character flaws in people. It simply reveals what was already there, hidden beneath the surface. My sister's sense of entitlement, my parents' conditional approval, my own need to prove my worth. All of these existed before the $12 million entered the equation. I also learned that generosity must come from free choice, not obligation or manipulation. The joy I found in supporting causes I believed in and helping people who showed genuine appreciation far outweighed any momentary satisfaction I might have gained from buying my family's approval. Have you ever had to choose between your well-being and family expectations? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons about protecting your boundaries. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most authentic life. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, your worth is never determined by your net worth, but by the integrity with which you live your life. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that message today.